Whether it's finding shelter for new arrivals or for the thousands of Chicagoans experiencing homelessness, Mayor Brandon Johnson says if you're without a roof over your head, the city will help under a new one shelter system that merges both populations.
2 more migrant shelters are closing in Chicago. The city says they are shutting down the Standard Social Club in the Loop and the Chicago Lakeshore Hotel in Hyde Park.
Mayor Johnson is providing an update on migrant care in our area, saying the city is going to have just one sheltering system. In fact, it's going to be called the One System Initiative.
Happening right now, cities along the southern border are bracing for a massive migrant caravan making its way through Mexico.
We are back in Chicago, everybody, and we are going back to our favorite mayor in the United States, Brandon Johnson, Mayor Brandon Johnson. Guess what, everybody? This migrant crisis finally broke the city of Chicago. They finally had to break down and admit that these hundreds of millions of dollars that they've been spending on these migrants, it was unsustainable. It was no longer tenable. They had to do something different. And it sounds like what they're going to do is they're going to combine their existing homeless program with the migrant program, put them together so they're no longer funding these as separate priorities within the city.
We are now able to shift from a large-scale crisis response to a more cost-effective, equitable, and strategic approach that addresses homelessness for all who need support.
The shift means winding down its separate migrant response by the end of the year. Beginning November 1st, the landing zone will end overnight hours, and by January 1st, it will cease operations.
Starting in January, people will then go look for shelter by calling 311, and it will be on a first available basis.
By relying on 311, migrant mutual aid groups are concerned new arrivals will be left out in the cold, literally.
I think we need to build some trust in 311 because that system is really inadequate for dealing with the unhoused population here in Chicago.
So they're consolidating all of the homeless shelters in the city of Chicago, which I don't have any clue whatsoever who told Brandon Johnson to fund the homeless initiative for Chicagoans one way and take another revenue stream and fund it a different way for migrants. We know that they've spent over hundreds of millions of dollars with this migrant crisis going on in Chicago. But did you hear what the deputy mayor said? She wants people to call 311. Hell, people in Chicago can't even depend on calling 911.
Neighbors say they're angry because they called 911 repeatedly before the shooting, but little was done to disperse the crowd. Steele called police after she heard the shots.
When we called them the first time, they should have came, made those kids go home. That's what they should have told them, to go home, break it up. I mean, can't they tell them that?
According to the city of Chicago, emergency dispatchers received more than 65,000 calls during a 24-hour period at the height of the unrest.
Women's cars! 10-1, Dearborn and Adams, I got 300 plus people. They're fighting and throwing things. I got officers from C&E cars. Dearborn and Adams, zone 4.
Thornton posted on Facebook, Chicago is in a death spiral and has quickly turned into a city that caters strictly to criminals who target the innocent. There is absolutely no accountability and there are no consequences, he wrote, for bad or even deadly behavior.
If you're still hanging out, I'm so glad because I have a surprise for you. Many of you may or may not know that I host a radio show locally in Chicago on an AM radio station, a legacy black AM radio station here in Chicago. And when Brandon Johnson, then Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallis were running for the runoff for mayor of the city of Chicago, I actually had the opportunity to sit down and actually interview Brandon Johnson. This is an exclusive. You're not going to see this anyplace else. And here's the proof that I actually got an opportunity to sit down and talk to Brandon Johnson. But let's get back to Chicago. Joining us in studio today is Cook County Commissioner and Chicago mayoral candidate Brandon Johnson. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, what's going on? Good afternoon. It's good to see you, brother.
I know it's kind of hard to see right there. We didn't have that shot framed in the best possible way. But I actually got a chance to speak to Brandon Johnson at length for over an hour. And I asked him some really important questions about his vision of, he was running for mayor then, what his possible vision was. And he let us know right in this interview what his priorities were in terms of migrants.
Our folks have done such a remarkable job building this country. Other people are trying to get here. Now, this is not, me just simply trying to, I'm just going to say it. We have built such a space in this country that other people want to come here. They do whatever is necessary. That is how secure we have made this city. And so when we don't have, it is the result of the political solutions have not matched the political problems.
As usual, you saw he dropped the race card, and I have another video that you can go back and check out where I really explore how he just played the race card repeatedly during a press conference where he was talking about the new Chicago Teachers Union board. You can go back and see that. As a matter of fact, I'll put a link at the end of this video. But you can see that he played the race card. He went on and expounded upon how he was going to, everything that the migrants, everything that everyone wants to come to this country for were things that Black people fought for. Black people fought for these rights. Now everybody's trying to come to this country and be the beneficiaries of the rights that Black people fought for, in our past in this country. And some would say that we're still fighting for today. So, that old saying, I hate to sound cliche, when people show you who they are, believe them. He was showing you who he was in this interview. But it's still amazing to me that it took an almost $1 billion budget deficit before this mayor finally said, we've got to look for some cost-cutting measures. We've got to find some ways to get this budget under control. It's fine that if we want to go after, revenue on the revenue side, try to get some additional taxes and some additional fees, but we've got to cut the expenses to get this budget under control, not only for the city of Chicago, but more importantly, and by extension, for the residents of the city of Chicago. But he said something very, very interesting at the end of this interview. I'll let you hear it right here.
The number of families that are unhoused, the number of families who do not have the support that they need when it comes to their mental health, the number of families who do not have the support that they need when it comes to academic growth. We don't have, the arts, the music. We don't have the sports programs to keep students engaged outside of the academic track.
Let me push back on you on 2 points. Because you brought up music, arts, sports. The United States lags 18th globally in math, 21st in science. The only way that we're going to maintain global dominance is not by a renaissance in music and sports and art. It's going to be because we have a renaissance in STEM. So I appreciate, I hear what you're saying, but is that a missed opportunity that we're not prioritizing the things to maintain our global place of supremacy?
To suggest that having a well-rounded curriculum does not put us at an advantage, as someone who is a professional who does this work, I'm going to push back on you. When the achievement gap was almost dissipated in America, unionization had reached 30%. I know that's in your second hour. There's a direct correlation to student performance and outcomes based upon W-2s.
Sure,
what actually helps students with math and science, of course, is to make sure that their parents are working.
Absolutely.
What I'm simply saying is if you want a well-rounded individual, because if you base my success on my math ability, I'm not in this conversation today.
So he says on the record, unabashedly, hey, if it's got something to do with math, I'm not in this conversation. This goes back to something I've talked about earlier. We've really got to start as voters making better decisions about the leaders whom we entrust to take these positions, whether it's mayor, whether it's governor, whether it's president, whether it's in the Congress. We've got to make decisions about people, not just based on identity politics. It's fine if you want to pick someone with whom your ideology and your priorities align, But at the end of the day, an individual who's going to run government needs to have a little bit of efficacy in basic math and accounting, because you're running, as the mayor of Chicago, you're running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. We cannot just continue to vote people in because they make us feel good or because we like them, and then put them in charge, and then they fall flat on their faces. Let's go back and look at some more of this idea about what they're doing in the city of Chicago.
Today, the message from Mayor Brandon Johnson: there will be limited resources for migrants arriving. The city of Chicago is eliminating 30-day shelter extensions for most shelter residents, changing hours of the landing zone, closing the State of Illinois Intake Center, and now saying that only migrants who've been in the country less than a month will be eligible for a shelter spot. No doubt these changes will help Chicago address a nearly $1 billion budget shortfall, but the numbers show thousands of migrants still need help. As of today, there are 4,996 residents in 13 shelters, 21 people awaiting placement. Since August 2022, the number of new arrivals in Chicago stands at 50,022.
And then there's the issue of a reduction in the number of available beds as Chicago prepares for winter weather. The mayor would not say how much the new plan will cost, only that it will be what the city can afford. Announcing the initiative now is seen as sending a message to migrants thinking about coming to Chicago.
Well, of course he's not going to talk about the cost. He's already on the record stating that if this conversation is about math, he's not part of this conversation. If you're still hanging out at this point in the video, I want to do something special for those of you who are returning and consuming this content. According to YouTube, approximately 90% of you return and watch these videos, but you haven't subscribed. And I didn't want to do that little cheap thing where I just put the little graphic in the bottom of the screen. I actually put some time into producing something just for you. So hang out for a few more seconds and let me know what you think of this.
I've been wandering through the desert of small YouTube channels. I'm lost out here with only a few views and likes to keep me going. But there's hope. You, yes, you can save me. And all it takes is one click. All I need you to do is subscribe.
Did you like that video? Go ahead and do me a favor. Drop a comment and let me know if you appreciated the time that it took to put together that montage as opposed to just a little graphic on the bottom asking you to subscribe. And if the majority of you like it, I'll continue to produce that in future videos. In the meantime, you can watch this video about Brandon Johnson when the school board resigned en masse, or you can watch this video about the train heist that took place in Chicago.